Hey, what is up guys? I'm KBHD here. This is the Pixel 4 XL. This is one of the phones I was looking forward to the most this entire year for 2019 for a couple of reasons. And so now I've been using it daily since its unveiling. This is my honest review. So let's just start with the way it looks. I honestly think it's a pretty decent looking phone. It's low-key really clean. There's almost no markings along the back, just the Google G at the bottom, matte black aluminum rails as part of the design all the way around the phone, speaker slots at the bottom lined up with the USB Type-C port, and the colored power button, of course, on every version. And the whole back of the phone, on two of the colors, is this soft touch matte finish, which does a great job of not showing fingerprints. It doesn't seem to scratch very easily at all. So of the three colors available, I'm gonna say this white, this panda version is the best one. That power button's pretty sweet. Then I'm gonna say Oh So Orange is in second place. Not so great power button, but at least it's matte. And then that jet black, weirdly very glossy version is in third place. Fun fact though, since the rails are still matte black, you can slap a matte black dbrand skin on the back of any of these phones and you just created the matte black everything phone Google should have made in the first place. So link to that below, and of course shout out to dbrand for sponsoring this video. The Pixel's square camera bump is again annoyingly a little bit raised, but I don't find this as drastic as say Apple's larger double raised triple camera bump, but more on the cameras later. So yeah, you know what, generally it's grown on me. Pretty decent looking phone. I was though let a little bit down by the not super clicky buttons, just the volume ones mainly. But on the other hand, something a lot of people have missed that's good to know, the phone is now IP68 water resistant. It still has the squeeze sensitivity for the assistant, and it still has stereo speakers. So they're not front-facing pair like they were last year, but they are still a good sounding, solid pair with the slots at the bottom and the earpiece speaker combined. The worst part about the way this phone looks is the front. The part you look at most of the time. I'm not a fan of the forehead. It has a smaller chin at the bottom than before, but yeah, that big forehead, I don't like it. I'm still kind of barely getting used to it. And overall, the reason for the forehead doesn't really have me convinced. So there's a cluster of new sensors up here in the top, including the selfie camera, then also infrared projector, receiver, and radar, which is new in any smartphone. And this new sensor suite up here is good for two things: the fastest face unlock in any smartphone, and some gestures. Okay, maybe it makes me a little not forward thinking, but I still like fingerprint sensors, and this phone has none of that. The face unlock is the only biometric unlock this phone has, and I find myself missing a fingerprint sensor. And the rate of improvement for fingerprint sensors under the glass has been pretty good. So that move was not my favorite. Pixel 4 uses a radar sensor to essentially project a little bubble around the phone to see when things are near it, when things are in the bubble, when they enter it, exit it, etc. So when you reach for your phone, basically your hand enters the bubble and it starts firing up the infrared and face unlock sensors early, so by the time you pick the phone up, it's already reading your face and logging you in. And it's incredibly fast, over and over again. It's super impressive. Possibly too fast. This kind of reminds me of the OnePlus 6 and other phones that would just do face unlock with just the RGB cameras, so they'd be insanely fast. They would just see anything that looks like you and just unlock as soon as you glance at it. So this isn't that. It's still infrared, so it still can't be fooled by a photo or video of you. It still works in the dark and things like that, so it's got advantages, but it's still a little bit wild. I find myself just unlocking this phone left and right all the time, anytime I even just look at it. Sometimes I pick up the phone just to move it across my desk, and I'll just glance at the time and it unlocks the phone. It also doesn't require your attention, so it will unlock with your eyes closed. That's a bit of a weird security quirk, and it actually even tells you it'll do this in the settings. When you turn this on, it says looking at the phone can unlock it when you don't intend it to, and your device can be unlocked by someone even if it's held up to your face, even if your eyes are closed, and potentially could be unlocked by someone who just looks a lot like you. These are things that could potentially be fixed or improved with a software update, and Google's been pretty good about software updates, but as of right now, they're just pretty annoying. My solution is turn off the skip lock screen option, so if I do accidentally unlock it, at least it won't be awake for a while. It just sits on the lock screen, and then it'll go back to sleep. But yeah, I mean, that's what I think I mean when I say I would have liked a fingerprint reader option. It's a little safer, we're a little more used to it, and it just sort of works when we need it and doesn't when we don't. So that's face unlock, but then these sensors also enable a couple very specific gestures. So anytime you're in a situation you can wave over your phone and use the gesture, the status bar sort of lights up. It starts glowing. and that means it's ready. So those situations are alarm clocks, timers, media controls, and a Pikachu live wallpaper. And there are no instructions like really built into Android. There's none in the Android 10 setup, for example. Nothing really tells you what's going on when you first get that glowing bar. You just kind of have to know. So when an alarm or a timer is going off, as your hand enters that radar bubble, it quiets the alarm, and then you can dismiss it by tapping or swiping away over the phone. That for me was my favorite. It worked really well. I can sleep with my phone on this Pixel stand next to the bed, and when the alarm goes off, I just reach for it and it's already quieting down. The other thing that was less consistent for me is music apps. So if you're in Spotify or Google Play Music or any supported app where that glowing bar starts showing up, you can swipe forward and swipe back through previous and next tracks. And yeah, that's it. Just forward and backwards. When I first tried this at the event, I was getting a success rate of like 10%. I'm not even exaggerating. Like, it was pretty abysmal. Now, with some troubleshooting and practice and some tips from Twitter, I'd say I'm up to like a 70% swipe success rate, maybe 75. So it's less of like a big arm movement, although that sometimes does work, but it's more of like a casual swipe and not too close to the phone, like right around where that radar bubble might be. I think the real problem is it doesn't show you or tell you how to do it better. The Made by Google Twitter account, they tweeted at me saying you can go to the Pixel Tips app, which is pre-installed on the Pixel, click Save Time, and then click Try It. And then there you will find a demo if you want to practice it. But even then, there isn't actually, I tried it, there isn't actually any feedback. It's just letting you practice. So all of that being said, I'm still not going to use these. It sort of falls in that same gimmick bucket as the G8's weird hover hand swiping action. If it told me how to do it better, maybe I'd be more into it, but yeah, not going to use these. If there's anything to love about the front of this phone, it's the new display. Pixel 4 and Pixel 4 XL have made the jump to smooth, high-res, high refresh rate 90 Hz displays, my favorite trend in smartphones of the past year or so. It's difficult to show you exactly how much better that looks. Obviously, I keep saying on camera because this is a 30 FPS video, you know, the correct frame rate. But in person, it makes a huge difference. And every time a new phone comes out with a 90 Hz or higher display, I can see a serious difference versus 60 Hz. It comes with some trade-offs though. It's not the brightest display. Sometimes daytime visibility is pretty weak, unfortunately, so I'm keeping this phone at max brightness often. And high refresh rate also requires more power, so you're gonna see a hit on battery life. Now initially, we're all concerned about the battery life on Pixel 4, knowing it has a high refresh rate, and then the XL having a 3700 milliamp hour battery, and the smaller Pixel 4 having a 2800 milliamp hour battery. That's one of the smallest I've seen in a phone in a while. But impressively, these phones have had, for me, okay battery life, but there's a big reason for that. I was briefly messaging Dave2D, he's testing the smaller Pixel 4, and he said he's getting around 5 hours of screen on time, which if I take his word for it, that's actually pretty impressive. For me, I've been getting around 5 hours on this XL on 90 Hz, which, you know, that's C+, which is a lot better than the F I thought it could be. Turns out the reason this phone has been able to get even okay battery life is because it ratchets down to 60 Hz constantly, all the time. It's supposed to be smart about it, so it says when you turn on smooth display that it'll turn back down to 60 Hz when you're not looking at it or you're not using it much, and then ratchet it back up to 90 when you're swiping or you see animations and stuff. But I found often it just stays at 60 Hz for extended periods of time for no apparent reason. It almost seemed like it was defaulting to 60 Hz most of the time and then sometimes bumping up to 90 Hz for scrolling and some other things. I started to not like it. I started to find that this phone felt significantly choppier like any other 60 Hz phone than, say, the OnePlus 7 Pro, which seems like it's almost always at 90 Hz. So I was like, okay, this isn't great. It's not my favorite implementation of 90 Hz. It's smooth sometimes, but it's almost like a tease that it switches back and forth so much. So I'm like digging around in developer options just to see if there's anything new. And there is. I found an option that I'd never seen before. It's called Force 90 Hz, and it just keeps the display at 90 Hz all the time, no matter what's happening on the screen, closer to what OnePlus does. and it's made a huge difference. Now it's always smooth. So I guess pro tip, if you're one of those people who's more of a power user and uses their phone all the time and wants to see that 90 hertz happen, you can go in the developer settings, scroll down, find force 90 hertz, and turn it on. It will obliterate your battery life. It's definitely even worse now, closer to a D. It's not lasting all day, but at least it's smoother now. Anyway, I also found that it has ambient EQ, which is supposed to be auto-adjusting the color temperature depending on the light around you, kind of like Apple's True Tone on the iPhone, but I found it much more subtle, so I just left it off. It's not nearly as dramatic. And overall, it's not the flashiest or most eye-catching or dramatic display on any smartphone. It doesn't curve over the edges or anything, but it's 90 hertz, it's 1440p, it's OLED, and it's flat. But listen, we all know what the Pixel 4 is about. It's what the Pixel 3 was about, and it's what the Pixel 2 was about. It's the cameras, and we got some new cameras on the back of the Pixel 4. There's dual cameras back here. It's a 12 megapixel primary camera and a new 16 megapixel 2x telephoto camera. Okay, if you told me the Pixel 4 would have the second camera of any Pixel phone and asked me what would be the most useless second camera they could put in the Pixel, right behind like a black and white depth sensor or a time of flight camera, I would have put like a 2x telephoto lens, just behind like an ultra wide clearly being way more fun, or a 3 or a 5x telephoto or any of that other stuff. But that's what we got. We got 2x telephoto. But you know what? Specs are just one thing. I gotta actually use it in person. That's what I've been doing. Maybe it'll change my mind. Yeah, it didn't really change my mind. Typical photos from the Pixel 4 are very similar to Pixel 3. Great dynamic range, great sharpness and detail, very contrasty and punchy and dramatic, and biasing a little bit towards cooler tones typically, if anything, but they're excellent photos. They've got this image processing pipeline and their HDR down to a science, and that didn't shock anyone, thankfully. So that's good. And the improvements in the viewfinder are cool too. You now have real-time approximation of the HDR effect you're going to get applied before you even snap the photo, so there's no guessing. You can pretty much just see what the final photo is going to look like as you're taking it. Plus there's new sliders for exposure and shadow adjustment that can be really cool and you can mess with if you want. But then having a second lens should mean portrait photos are better now because you have two lenses and you can finally do depth data between them. I found that they're about the same. Matter of fact, some of the ones I took of Mac here look worse than any I ever took on the Pixel 3. Just look at that cutout failure. That's pretty terrible. Maybe I shouldn't depend on pet photos for my testing of portrait mode, but I'm not exactly convinced by that. But generally on photos of people, it's doing about the same job with that aggressive cutout. And then speaking of portrait mode, you actually can't do wide portrait photos anymore, which the Pixel 3 took some of the best wide portrait photos, but it gets even more double weird when you actually look into it. So Pixel 3 took some pretty great portraits with one wide camera, right? When you switch to portrait mode on the Pixel 4, it automatically zooms in, but not quite to 2x, to about 1.7 or 1.8x, but then it doesn't let you zoom out and take wide portrait photos like the iPhone does. But as I'm messing with this, I realize if I cover the telephoto camera while I'm in portrait mode, nothing happens. It's still using the main camera for portrait mode photos. It's just using the second camera for depth approximation. So why does it zoom in? I have no answer for that. So basically the best thing about having a telephoto camera is for zoomed in photos. I don't take a lot of zoomed in photos, but I did notice them higher quality. So if you're someone who likes to go 6, 8x zoomed in, you'll appreciate the better super res zoom. There you go. Anyway, the question still is this the best camera in any smartphone? Because I think we can all agree Pixel 3 was top of the stack last year, but now the field is catching up, especially iPhone 11 Pro. So which is better? Okay, honestly, in daylight for most photos, I prefer Pixel photos. I definitely like that contrasty, punchy, detailed look. Same with wide-angle selfies, punchy, detailed. I'm a fan. In lower light, though, I actually start to prefer iPhone photos, and I know the Pixel, just got astrophotography capabilities that are really cool, and night sight has always been great for well over a year now, but they get a little more dramatic and, as a result, a little more noisy, and iPhone's new night mode and deep fusion, I think, stay truer to life, and as a result, better in quality. Fun fact, I actually did a collab that's live now with SuperSaf in one of his legendary side-by-side photo comparisons. So that's the best way to see the differences between the two, so you can see iPhone 11 Pro versus Pixel 4 side by side in all their glory. I'll leave a link below to that. So is this the best camera in any smartphone? Sometimes I'm gonna say it's a toss-up depending on the scenario, and that's not a cop-out. I gave my reasons. But if I could only pick one, which is sort of a different question, I would pick iPhone 11 Pro because it's more versatile, it has the ultra-wide, and it absolutely crushes it in video. Like, video is just not as much of a focus with the Pixel 4's camera anymore, no pun intended. It tops out at 4K 30 FPS, which Google tweeted is because it would basically take up too much storage. But then, like, you could have still enabled it in settings if you really cared, right? And that also doesn't explain why it doesn't have 24 FPS video, which would have been a cool addition. And it also tops out at 1080p from the front-facing wide camera. So just generally, if you're in it for video, you shouldn't be looking at Pixel, you should be looking at iPhone 11 Pro. My Pixel versus iPhone camera graph is like this pair of lines where the middle is where most photos are taken most of the time, and that's where I prefer Pixel. But on the edges of photography, like low light or ultra wide, then the iPhone does better. So there, hopefully that explanation makes sense. And then you can't forget Android 10, which gets the special treatment on the Pixel since it's Google's baby. There are some good features here that add to how smart it is as a smartphone. You already heard about the radar bubble and the smart unlock features. They moved the text-to-speech offline local on the phone, so text-to-speech is way faster and way more consistent. I love that. You can talk as fast as you want and it just works. And there's a new voice recorder app that takes advantage of that to live transcribe everything you say and then indexes that text to make it searchable. That's like an S Pen level feature. I personally probably won't use it too much, but I can see how people who use that would find it a really big deal. But yeah, the best part of the Pixel, again, is how refined Android is. If you want the latest version of Android, if you want to be first with updates, if you want the coolest Edge features and the Assistant and all that, this is the phone to get. So overall, many of the conclusions about Pixel 4 are of course about how disappointing it is, which I think is an easy conclusion to reach if you followed all the leaks and nothing really surprised you, and there are things that are let down. I personally really enjoyed using Pixel because of the punchy, confident, excellent camera for still photos, and the 90 Hz display, which a lot of phones don't have yet, and of course the extra RAM, finally a smooth Pixel phone. But this isn't a phone I'm gonna go around recommending to everyone. It still needs a bigger battery, still needs more storage, and it's just generally not complete for most people. So I guess if you're like me, which is in a tiny group of people who really like high refresh rate screens, of course value the camera and want the latest version of Android and these quick updates and things like that, and you're willing to overpay, because we all know the Pixel is a bit overpriced for the storage you don't get, then sure, I recommend the Pixel. It's great for people like that. But for most people, I'm not gonna end up recommending the Pixel 4, mainly because of the battery, but also because there are just better deals out there right now, including the cheaper iPhone 11. Weird to say, but it kind of hits the ear funny, but it's true. So there you have it, the Pixel 4, possibly a victim of the hype machine of being the most leaked phone of all time. I kind of wouldn't be surprised if it happens again next year, but either way, now you know what it's like to own it. And I'm curious, are you in this tiny group of people who would like this Pixel experience? Let me know. Either way, thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.